Final stop Brazil. Book 2. Life After Hell. Chapter 16. Devastating news. From the German consulate I received, in response to my letter, all application forms for this shitty typical German certificate of no impediment, which exists in no other country in this form, and actually makes a marriage outside of the German standards almost impossible. Mr. Sturm was featuring in this letter everything as if he had done everything he could to help, and had immediately called Wesley, after depositing the money into his account, to ask him for the initiating the process for the Agassiz. Wesley told me later that he had brushed off this Mr. Sturm, that it was pretty much too late, thanks to him. Did Sturm have the fear now that I was sawing on his chair? An accompanying letter of Michael didn't exactly make me feel better. He wrote that he loved me still, he missed me very much. I needed not to worry. He would never forget me, but he demanded suddenly the truth of me, why I was in prison, and how I came up with the idea that Chris was arrested. 2 weeks ago, he wrote, Chris had called him to ask how he was. He allegedly wanted to know the address of Michael to send him our stuff. With this shock, I had to sit down first. This swine had sent someone else with his documents to hell. Again, someone he had wanted out of the way. Someone who had become uncomfortable, and he still enjoyed his freedom. Not only was I shocked, I was worried about Michael, very scared. I knew Chris well enough to know that he never, ever would spend money to send Michael some things. Michael was in serious danger, but what should I do? Nobody listened and nobody believed me. But how did Chris get Michael's German phone number? Was Kathy so vicious to send her own brother to the doom? The rest of the letter I was only incidentally aware of, even though it struck me what he wrote. I will under no circumstances come to Brazil. I hate Brazil because they arrested you there. Maybe I'll stay in Germany, or I'll go to another country. Michael was full of contradictions in his letter. The entire letter was written under the influence of his sister. This time I immediately responded to him. I had to warn Michael, hoping that it wasn't already too late, and that Michael did for once what I instructed him to do. Michael, you are in greatest danger. Please, turn to your educator with this letter. Once again I explained all the story so that the educator would understand it was Chris who destroyed our lives, and that Michael should definitely not give his address. I also explained to Michael that the country of Brazil and the people were not to be blamed that I was stuck here. I wrote to him that hate would not change anything. I did not hate anyone anymore. The people that did this to me simply had become unimportant to me. With this I meant Chris and Kathy, but I left it out in the letter. Instead, I described to him how wonderful this country was, and full of fascinating contrasts. The most, so I wrote to him, I appreciated in Brazil that there was neither racism nor xenophobia. That this indeed existed in prison I kept out, of course, because I described to him life outside. But a lot of career options, even for him. On all 6 pages I explained why I would not return to Germany, and asked him to understand me. Nevertheless, I missed him so painfully, and asked him for a second chance for us. I was still willing to compromise, and offered to return to Spain, or perhaps Portugal, if he would be willing to live with me. Anything but not Germany. This old witch with whom I worked together at the packing table had long complained to our forewoman, until this one called me for a conversation to inform me that she had classified me as a cleaner, pretty much the last thing I wanted to do here. I asked her to let me go into production. I know I'm not the fastest with the packing, but I'm always there and don't run outside constantly from work. I do what I can, but I think the packing is not for me. Let me go into production, please. The problem was not that I was too slow, The old woman had complained that I was disturbing. Disturbing? What with? With the fact that I didn't involve in that stupid chatter at the table? Our forewoman, Donna Eginelza, did not seem to like me in particular, but she gave me the chance to work in production. There I was, however, under her constant criticism. She always kept an eye on me, and if things didn't go fast enough, she had to go at me immediately. The last thing I needed now was that Donna Mara started to talk in the cell. I should take my work more serious, otherwise I would lose the job. So what? Was it her business? I was pissed off and spoke hardly with nobody. With those mad women in the cell, only the most necessary, otherwise only to Julia. I worked harder than before. During the breaks I just had one quick cigarette instead of, as before, two. In the evening I immersed myself in one book Julia had given to me, which fascinated me completely. The Accidental President, by Fernando Enrique Cardoso, the previous president before Ignacio Lula da Silva. This book was all about the history, internal and foreign policy, economic development of Brazil, and of course the career of Cardoso and his election opponent for long years and eventual successor Lula. It was all described in such interesting, even some funny way that I could hardly tear myself away from this book. Through this book I learned much more about Brazil. Even the high level of violence I could partly understand. The population lived only since 1994 in an almost non-violent democracy that replaced the military dictatorship. I had great respect for this country, Brazil. In 12 years they had managed some procedure of change which Germany didn't manage in 50 years. There, everything was still the same. Julia was quite amazed when I returned the book to her after a few days and told her about it. She remarked, "You have actually absorbed this book, haven't you?" Meanwhile, I thought about it and decided not to pass Wesley the information about Chris I had received from Michael. Wesley had no opportunity to protect Michael anyway. It wouldn't help nobody, because the police worked too slow or not at all. Why had there never been an investigation under Chris' address? What had Interpol been doing 1 year to relieve me? Nothing. I would probably just damage myself if I would pass on this information. Eunice's brother, Elias, stayed away and never appeared again. This Dilma and Julia took as an opportunity to discuss the issue further, who should serve me as a substitute to have at least this problem of the groom out of the way. Pedro, Julia's husband, still offered me his friend, and still he reaped an evil eye of Julia for this. Dilma's mother took the mission very seriously and demanded a complete written CV, which he was going to find a man for marriage with. Julia asked Alexander, her son, to look for a man, but week after week nothing happened. Dilma had long since recognized my sadness and longing. I tried to hide or to fake it with jokes. You do need someone who loves you, who takes care of you as long as you are here, and where you can go to later when you get out of here. She had me sussed out, and the search continued. Julia's daughter even offered her own brother. "Why are you not marrying Alex?" Bingo. "I'm going to talk that issue with your mother later, okay?" I joked, after Alexander's and my eyes crossed, embarrassed. Well, there was still the brother of Dilma, and even a brother of Dilma's husband, who was not yet married. Also, he was a little overweight, but otherwise quite okay. Since nothing could be hidden, it leaked through to my cell that I was looking for someone to marry. Thus, Fatima had another brother. Oh, and then there was the nice colleague of her husband. If this had not all been so sad, it would have been a comedy to be filmed. Mr. Waldman brought Claudia and me the obligatory Christmas jumbo. For me, there was not much to discuss with him, other than the repeated clarification of my credit. I repeated that I had to set a monthly payment to the account of my lawyer. The consulate was the only institution allowed to withdraw money from my prison account, so they should kindly see to it that the regular payment got on the account of my lawyer. I justified this by mentioning the late payment of Mr. Sturm, which cost me my freedom. Must not ever happen again. Again he started like Mr. Sturm. I would not do it if I was you. I only thought secretly, but to pay 11,000 reais to some Mrs. Bishop, that you would do. But I didn't speak it out aloud. This time Mr. Waldman had a letter of my mother, a response to the request to help me once again with money. Very disappointing for me. She wrote that she got the call from Mr. Sturm and had been very angry. I should not think that she had money in abundance to her disposal. After all costs, still remained only 200 euro per month. Did she include the costs and hours of phone calls to Brazil with Mr. Waldman? I would have much have preferred if she had written in a nice way, "Unfortunately, I cannot help you. I don't have the money, but hope nevertheless that you will soon be released." Something like this, but she always being the same. She could never bring up kind words to say or write. Also in this letter was not a single nice word. My fate didn't interest her, just as she wasn't interested in Michael's life. Instead, she gave me a set of how much the life insurance of my father had paid out, and that she had to attack their savings to pay for the grave. She was writing about our relatives and that people in Germany were unemployed. It didn't appear well in Germany. Oh, really? Had she ever wondered why I left Germany a long time ago? She also was ill and could not be upset any more. Therefore, Mr. Sturm had sent my last letter only after consultation with my oldest sister. Since I had written something like the thought of suicide, I assumed bad things. Yes, I wrote that I would do something to me if anything should happen to Michael, but I didn't send this letter via the consulate or the Foreign Office. This meant that the prison authorities sent out the letters I sent directly, still first to the consulate for reading. So I would send no more letters officially to Germany. There were other ways. I sat down and wrote her promptly an equally friendly reply letter in which I announced that she would get her money back and all she had spent so far for me, and she wouldn't need to help me any more. In order not to harm her health any further, I would not bother her with my problems in the future. Another one I wrote to Michael, asking him to help me getting my money from Spain, as I would have to repay his grandmother, and therefore desperately needed the money, and the rest for my lawyer. Furious, I wrote him that he should finally get us moved to do something for me. He did not need to do anything by himself. All I asked of him was to contact Tucande. Could this really be so hard? After sending the letter out without being read by the consulate, I felt a little better, but that didn't last long. As on the 8th of December 2006, Wesley came to bring me verbally my sentence. 5 years, 3 months and 2 days. For me, the world was falling apart. I was shocked and speechless. For Wesley, this was just as unexpected. He didn't know what to say to comfort me. We must now look ahead and quickly prepare for the appeal. But quickly, nothing is done in Brazil, because I would have to wait 6 months until I had the written sentence in my hand. I would have to sign it, and thus could put in for appeal simultaneously. Then it would again take up to 9 months until the court decided on the appeal. So this meant, once again, 1.5 years without any hope of release. Wesley asked, in addition to the 500 reais he already had on his account, another 500 for the appeal procedure, with a total of 1,000 reais. He was nevertheless still a lot cheaper than Mrs. Bishop. But he agreed this time that I would pay it off in installments of my wages, after I explained to him that absolutely nothing more was to be expected of my family. He promised to do everything to promote my process, but in the moment he could not do more for me. With tears in my eyes, I went back to work. I found it very hard to pull myself together and continue working. During the lunch break, I went to Julia, who was already informed by Wesley, and tried to reassure. Wesley gets you out of here. You have to have a little patience. From Julia I learned how Wesley had been affected on this hard, unjust sentence, and did not know how he should inform me about it. Julia was also affected, and found no words when I openly wept in her presence. Without food, I returned to work. It pounded all afternoon in my head. 5 years, 5 years, 5 years. I adjusted my radio, trying to distract myself with music, without success. Again and again, tears were running down my face. I wiped away, surreptitious. Nobody should see me like this. In the evening, I took tranquilizers again, and my last thought before falling asleep was, it will take a very long time until I see Michael again. The following Saturday, I sat down with Julia to go through my entire case again for the elaboration of an appeal strategy, which I sent on Sunday to Wesley. Dilma and her family tried to encourage me. Don't fall into despair now. Don't give up hope. And above all, you have to go on working now. This is very important right now. I have to, anyway, to be able to pay Wesley. Of my family, I cannot expect anything. These people here found the behavior of my so-called family completely incomprehensible. Everyone here was giving his last to bring mother, wife, daughter, or sister out of here and provide moral support. Again, it was painfully clear to me how lonely I was. Julia, who knew me now only too well and always like a mother hen keeping an eye on me, said, "It requires urgent consideration of a husband." That she came just now with this topic made me almost laugh, even though I was still fighting to hold back my tears. Mr. Sturm and some others had now what they wanted. Alexandre, Julia's son, came later than the others this Sunday. Julia was very angry. She was nervous too, because she knew that she would soon be released, but didn't know the exact date yet. Scolded him because he had not completed her applied task. With a quick glance at me, she continued, "Where is the husband for Rita?" Alex only grinned, which made her only angrier. "This is no joke, I'm serious. For weeks, I tell you, you shall find a man for Rita." She was getting carried away in her rage as she glared at her Pedro. "Then you just get married to Rita." I didn't believe my ears when she turned to me. "Will you marry him?" My jaw fell open. After I gained a little after the shock, I reminded Julia of the fact that it was her husband she was offering me. "But we are not married legally." She gave me the answer. "If you want, you marry him, and if you have the residence, then you get divorced again." Now Pedro also said something to the matter. "I make myself available. Do you want to marry me?" Seeking for help, I looked over at Julia. "Well, say yes now." "So, it is yes. Then the problem is at least finally solved." She got up and left us all alone at the table. Julia's husband sat with me on my side of the table. However, it turned out to be not as easy with the marriage as it seemed initially, because Pedro lived for a long time with Julia in a consensual relationship. However, was still married to another woman, but assured me to take care immediately of a divorce. "All mere formality," he said. Then we changed the topic to his 11 children. Really good. I didn't feel at the thought of borrowing Julia's husband. Then he explained why, as seen from his point of view, my punishment turned out so high. The Brazilian judges differ in the first instance only if someone comes from Africa or from Europe, without examining more detailed the case. For the accused Africans, they automatically assume that they smuggle drugs only out of poverty and deprivation. Europeans, however, have no need to do so because they come from rich countries and thus pure greed is assumed. Albeit from the perspective of the judges and punished therefore higher. I was horrified by this theory. That really is totally a false conclusion. The facts are complete opposite. Those Nigerians are the ones who don't condescend to normal work and act out of pure greed. And if there's among hundreds of Africans and South Americans one European woman, I think this should probably be reason enough to investigate the case closer and dig deeper why it is so. Pedro agreed totally with my opinion, but he was not a judge. The visiting time was over, and when everyone left, I said as a joke to Julia, "There he goes, our husband." Laughing, Julia embraced me and agreed. Yes, our husband.